Agroforestry and C4 it is a great pleasure for me to welcome you to this interactive session on agroecology, ecosystem-based adaptation in agriculture. My name is Harald Lossack. I am the head of a global project on mainstreaming EBA at GIZ headquarters, which has been commissioned by the German Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety through the International Climate Initiative. It is an honor to me to facilitate this session together with my colleague Frida Mikulczak, who will be guiding you through the second part of this event. What is, in a nutshell, the purpose of this session? Given the fact that the current global food system did not eliminate hunger and contributes to increasing levels of malnutrition and destruction of natural landscapes, a very profound transformation seems to be urgent. If current patterns prevail, they will lead to a massive loss of natural resources, destroy ecosystems and their functions, and will make agricultural production more vulnerable to climate hazards. The climate crisis is deepening this development and pushes natural ecosystems to their limits. At the same time, current food and land use systems account for 21 to 37% of global greenhouse gas emissions and are thus one of the main drivers of climate change. In the attempt to make food and land use systems more sustainable and climate resilient, a transformational approach is needed. According to the IPCC, there is a robust scientific evidence and high agreement that increasing the resilience of the food systems through agroecology is an effective way to achieve adaptation to climate change. Throughout this session, we want to show that agroecology as an ecosystem-based adaptation measure can enhance agricultural productivity and preserve at the same time the delivery of ecosystem services. We want to emphasize that there is a strategic opportunity for climate change resilience when the agriculture and climate change communities develop joint programs and strategies. For this sake, we will pursue the following agenda. After the introductory remarks, we would have 3 keynote interventions, followed by a Q&A slot to answer questions from the audience. After that, we would draw initial conclusions and reflections on the presentations, followed by closing remarks from the organizers. But before we start, let me touch some housekeeping rules. Please keep your mics muted when you are not speaking. We offer the Woofa platform to put questions. On the right-hand side of your screen, you will see buttons labeled discussion and questions. You can post comments in the discussion box and questions for the panelists in the questions box. If you especially like a question that someone else has posted, you can give it a thumbs up, which helps us to see which questions are most important for us to answer. We will try to answer your questions directly. If there are too many, we will respond them after the meeting. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Thorsten Klose-Zuber, for his introductory remarks to frame the main topic of this event. Thorsten heads the Climate Policy, Economy and Society Division at Zug, which includes overseeing Germany's International Climate Initiative, or ICI. He studied geography and political science at the University of Bochum and the University of Namibia, and completed his PhD in 2009, focusing on disaster preparedness within German humanitarian assistance. Between 2009 and 2019, he worked in various positions with the German Red Cross and the German Federal Foreign Office. Thorsten, the floor is yours.
Harald, thank you very much, and good afternoon and good morning, dear colleagues. First of all, I have to apologize because I have to wear this mask all the time as I'm sitting in our German delegation office at the COP26, where we have very strict hygiene rules. I just did one so that you at least can see my face once. So and then I have to put it on again. I'm very sorry. So yeah, colleagues, thank you very much for this invitation. I'm very pleased to speak on behalf of the International Climate Initiative, which is, as you all know, funded by the German Ministry for the Environment, Nature, Conservation and Nuclear Safety. And thank you very much for the invitation, and special thanks to GIZ, to ECRAF, World Agroforestry and TMG Research for having this jointly hosted session today. And I'm very happy to share our perspective from the ICI, especially on ecosystem-based adaptation. I think we all know that this decade will be decisive to fight the climate and at the same time the biodiversity crisis, and undoubtedly the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions is going to be the top priority. But what also has shown us the global COVID-19 pandemic is actually once more that when we are facing this kind of complex and multiple crises, that we have to work together very closely. And without healthy ecosystems, we will not be able to sustain or even increase the health or well-being and adaptive capacities of our societies. We therefore appreciate very much that today's session not focuses only on a sector that obviously plays a major role for green recovery, but also that the session underlines that we have to act together jointly to overcome those various challenges. I mean, alongside with the CBD COP, but also through many other key events this year, for example, the Climate Adaptation Summit or the Adaptation Future Conference, the message is clear as it can be. We have to increase our ambitions for adaptation, especially in the agriculture sector. And I strongly believe that this is already reflected within the ICI portfolio, but will also increase within the ICI portfolio. And with almost all new and updated NDCs, which are prioritizing adaptation or mitigation in agriculture and land use, it becomes evident that scaling up climate action in agriculture and land use is key in order to be able to meet the goals that we have set out in the 2015 Paris Agreement. In general, the agriculture and land use sector embarks obviously high potential, since it can contribute to, on the one hand, reducing obviously greenhouse gas emissions, at the same time increasing biodiversity and also food security, while at the same time also providing economic opportunities for small households and interest for the ICI, as you hopefully know, to realize this potential, as well as to increase the resilience of the sector to the adverse impacts of climate change. Ecosystem-based adaptation, nature-based solutions are a major topic at the COP. Most of my events I joined yesterday were focusing on this topic already, and this topic is gaining more and more importance in the ICI portfolio as well, as it can help to strengthen the resilience of people and ecosystems against climate events, thereby also protecting lives, livelihoods, and assets. And in particularly, was already mentioned in the introductory words of Harald, for effects of disasters, we can obviously also protect people from food insecurity, which are often caused by shocks in the agricultural sector. Within the ICI portfolio, we have a number of excellent examples. I just want to name two of them, which is one is the Climate SDG Integration Project, which is going to be highlighted as well. It's by TMG, managed to apply a bottom-up approach that led to the establishment of national EBA roadmaps to bring it down to the national circumstances and dialogue process, mainstreaming EBA project that has become a fundamental part of the ABA architecture in ICI's adaptation portfolio, but also globally. And without your support and engagement, for example, the annual EBA Knowledge Day, the EBA Community of Practice, the EBA Support Facility, and all those different joint efforts within IUCN and the Friends of Adaptation, I'm pretty sure that the EBA community could not have been such a success story as it is already. And since access to financing instruments, I will also talk about that, for EBA measures remains central to enhance local and regional partnerships within the ICI as well, I would like to encourage you to regularly check our funding opportunities through the ICI-funded Global EBA Fund, which is also going to be a crucial fund for EBA activities. I will stop here. I, of course, remain in the session. I just want to underline that it's always a pleasure to participate in EBA events and to join also virtually now the EBA community. And it's also great to see that we are expanding the network with new members, expertise, and ideas. So thank you very much again for the invitation. Very much looking forward. Harald, I believe you're still muted. I'm sorry.
That's the classic. Thank you very much for these challenging remarks that we will be delighted to discuss further on, Thorsten. But first, I would like to announce our second speaker, Georgina Katakura Vargas, for some initial remarks on the role of agroecological social movements in the transformation of food systems towards climate resilience. Gina is a professor at the Catholic Bolivian University and president of the Latin American Scientific Society of Agroecology. She holds a PhD in agroecology and specializes in transdisciplinary and gender-oriented research. She has served for more than a decade as advisor of the National Competent Environment Authority of Bolivia and as a negotiator representing her country in different regional and multilateral environmental agreements. Gina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It is a real pleasure to be part of this event, which is very timely. And I would like to start in this topic that I've been requested to share on the perspective of social movements and also this socio-political perspective of agroecology, particularly from Latin America. I would like to start with one point that is highly discussed and promoted in these discussions, and is to disentangle a little bit the term of agriculture, to avoid its generalized use, acknowledging that there is not only one type of agriculture, there is no one type of food system, but a variety of them. And from here, what the political and the social analysis from social movements is to clearly differentiate from this myriad of food systems and means of production, at least two that are very opposite in terms of their values, approaches, and also social and ecological effects and impacts. And one of those is the industrial agriculture and food systems, which is a major contributor of climate change. And because it consists in monocrops, genetic uniformity, and land use change, it also uses a high volume of synthetic inputs, heavy machinery, and lately digital technologies whose production, transportation, use imply a really huge amount of water, materials, energy, besides the ecological deterioration and contamination that produce, particularly in relation to biodiversity. And also that industrialized systems that relied on extreme specialization, leading to concentration of the processes, the infrastructure, the capital, leading to the exclusion of those who have less access of these resources. So this is from one side. And from the other side, we have a completely different approach, which is agroecology, which in general terms organizes and characterizes in 4 groups of attributes that are very important to recognize from the social movement perspectives, and that all are also relevant to contribute to address the climate, sanitary, food, and energy crisis that we are facing. One of these group of attributes is that it relies on biodiversity. Biodiversity producing biodiverse systems, the biodiversity cultivated inside the plots and around the plots. And biodiversity that is mostly native, locally adapted, that is crucial for restoring the ecosystem functions that sustain healthy, productive, and feasible production systems. And these positive features are not possible without biodiversity, meaning they are not possible from the logic and practice of specialization and monocrops, even if they are organically produced with biological inputs. So biodiversity is a very crucial point from the social movement perspective, because it doesn't lead only to ecological processes, but also very important social and organizative processes, which is related to the second group of attributes of agroecology, which is the promotion of autonomy at 3 levels: at food level, technological level, and also energy level. Since it relies on this biodiversity that it produces, relies on the local resources, the systems of knowledge that are adapted to the local conditions, and the renewable energies provided by the sun, but also by the living organisms that, that come from the biodiversity restored. Linked to these two, the third group of attributes is that agroecology strengthens the social tissue from below, providing opportunities and a qualitative improve of livelihoods of those who have less, those who are vulnerable, marginalized, and even invisibilized, including peasants, smallholders with limited access to land, to credit, and here rural women and rural youth are particularly important. And the fourth group of attributes resulting also from the previous is that agroecology promotes political change around food and agriculture, shifting from highly concentrated, homogenized and homogenizing systems to decentralized, democratized, diversified, and inclusive approaches. So these approaches, if these 4 groups of attributes are not fulfilled, well, then we don't have agroecology. And this is very important to mention in these times where there are really very strong waves of cooptation of agroecology, attempting to empty it from its ecological, but also social and political principles. So agroecology is not only and technically ecologically driven approach, but also is a strategy for transformation of the food systems at social, at political level, which is urgent in the face of these multiple crises that we are passing through now, particularly climate change. So I will leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gina. We are already in the middle of the discussion, and these were already very, very valuable inputs. And now I would have liked to introduce our third keynote speaker, but he has some problems in connecting to this conference. He should speak about he's already here. I can see it.
Seems like he just entered the room again. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay. So, Vargas, are you here? Well, let's see. Our third keynote speaker, Mr. Vargas Sinclair, will present one of our prepared papers for this session, the white paper on agroecology as a nature-based solution in agricultural landscapes. Vargas is the principal scientist at C4ICRAF and leads the center research on the contribution of trees to the productivity of farming systems. And he also coordinates the smallholder production systems and markets component of the CGIAR research program on forest, trees, and agroforestry. He also works with Bangor University in Wales, UK, and is a visiting professor of the Latin American Center for Tropical Agricultural Research and Higher Education, CATIE, in Costa Rica. Vargas, if you hear us, the floor is yours.
He seems to have technical issues.
Yeah. Then, as he is still trying to get in, I would like maybe Jess Weigelt to take up this part of our presentation.
Thank you,
Yes.
Harold. My name is Jess. I'm head of programs at TMG Research, and I have the pleasure of co-authoring this paper with Vargas. So while Vargas is still in the process of hooking up to the platform, I will try to speak to some of the key messages that we wanted to highlight in the paper. And Vargas, if you come in, just let me know, and I'm happy to give you the floor. I think what I want to say is, first of all, everybody of you who knows Vargas knows that I'm a very poor replacement of really the knowledge and the experience that Vargas brings to the field. So I would ask your apologies for being a poor substitute for Vargas, although we're sort of probably both qualified in the old wild man global north category. In terms of experience in agroecology, Vargas has really a lot more to share. So please bear with me and what I have to say. And actually what I want to say is, I'd like to build on where Georgina has left it, basically with the question of, can we, are we able to push the needle ahead if we think of agroecology and ecosystem-based adaptation only as technological approaches with certain agronomic principles? Or do we have to think of them in a more political way? And I think the terms that you have used, Georgina, was democracy, building the social tissue from below. And I'm highlighting this because I think the reports that are coming in all emphasize that we significantly need to upscale both biodiversity protection, climate change adaptation, and our efforts to achieve food security. And I think, and this is this is the first message of the paper that I would like to emphasize, which actually triggered this session, is that the responses to the related challenges of achieving food security and climate resilience too often remain in silos. We basically do not use all the synergies that are out there to really push the needle ahead when it comes to upscaling. That's one. Second, this sort of as an element of this session, ecosystem-based adaptation and agroecology, although they originate in different policy communities, they share common principles and approaches that support joint policies, programs, and strategies. Both are systems-based approaches. Both approaches really try to strengthen and maintain ecosystem services for the benefit of human beings, be it for climate change adaptation or for food security. However, and this will not come as big news to all of you, food and climate policy communities have only recently really started interacting with each other. So what we are trying to submit here through this session is that there is a huge opportunity for cooperation that we would encourage to be explored more systematically for the benefit of both ecosystem-based adaptation and agroecology. And I think there's a lot to be learned. I don't know who of you had the pleasure to listen to the earlier sessions today on ecosystem-based adaptation, agroecology, principally the example of Sri Lanka that was featured earlier. The two communities have really started to work together. Agroecology is applied in agricultural landscapes as an ecosystem-based adaptation strategy. So a long story short, there's a lot already to be learned from. We need not start from scratch. But I think, and this is my last point that I would want to make in terms of introduction, it is really key that these communities really start exploring these synergies. Because in the end, the challenges that we are facing in terms of upscaling, be it markets that are inaccessible, be it land tenure systems that do not allow for upscaling, be it underdeveloped rural finance systems, be it disempowered communities, to actually address these structural issues, inhibiting inclusive rural development, inhibiting upscaling of EBA and agroecology. They are the same for both approaches. And to actually address these key challenges or wicked problems of rural development, we need new partnerships, we need new alliances, coordinated approaches between these two streams of thinking. And this is what we want to contribute to with this session. Overall, let's please stop thinking of upscaling as something that is just going to happen by pouring in more resources and multiplying successful pilot projects. Upscaling in and of itself, and again, coming back to Georgina, is to a large extent also a political endeavor to really create the conditions that we need for ecosystem-based and adaptation agroecology to flourish, and to get there, we need new approaches. Thank you very much, Harald, for giving me the floor, and I apologize, Vargas, for probably truncated presentation of what you would have presented. Thank you very much, everyone, and thanks for linking up.
Thank you, Jess, and as you are the co-author of this white paper, you did it very well, and there are already some questions by the audience coming in, and I would like to take the opportunity to first ask Thorsten on the future of the ICI, International Climate Initiative. What is the Secretariat of the ICI doing or planning to do to further upscale EBA? Please, Thorsten.
Yes, Harald, thank you so much. Excellent question, and I could also see already in the chat a question which is also going into the same direction. So, what is the Global North doing, and how seriously is the Global North taking its ambition to increase the adaptation portfolio within the agriculture sector? I mean, I can speak on behalf, of course, from the international perspective and the International Climate Initiative, and there I can assure you that obviously it is going to be even more important, and the entire complex is going to play a crucial role within the ICI for sure. I mean, it's obviously that the transformation of the agriculture sector can only be achieved if we think about stronger partnerships and to include parties that perhaps not have been included in the past, be it from the decision maker side, political level, small scale farmers, but also representatives of the private sector for sure, which is something that is of high importance for the ICI portfolio. So I think when it comes to how to increase the ambition and how to underline the importance of this topic within the ICI, the cooperation across those different levels and hierarchies and also different groups is going to be more important. But the involvement of stakeholders of the private sector, I would point out as being very important in the future ICI portfolio. It is already becoming more and more important within the ICI. There are examples, for example, there the BMU and some of you might know it, it's implemented by UNDP and FAO, and this is focusing on how to adapt the agricultural sector in combination with the NDCs and as part of the adaptation plans. So we have to think how we can better integrate the private sector into the implementation within the ICI project as such. But to answer the question, of course, in the as well, how seriously is the global? We even can see examples where the Global North can even learn from some
Okay. Torsten, we almost lost you. Okay, thank you so much, Torsten. These are very promising perspective for future work of IKI. I think you mentioned as well the necessity to think the different sectors together. And this brings me to a question for Gina. Gina, you emphasized as well not only the role of the social movements, but of the communities, of the biodiversity community, which has a very, very important role in the climate discussion. What would you say? What are the challenges, the immediate challenges ahead to bring these communities together, and obviously the agricultural community as well? Please, Gina.
Thank you, Harald. Well, the challenges at many dimensions, and I would like to focus to more once again to the political realm, because, and I'm going to speak from the Latin American perspective. The communities, the agroecological communities that are composed mainly by peasants, communities, indigenous peoples, small-scale holders, different movements of rural women, youth, the urban agriculture movement, etc. The issues, the technical issues that they address and the organizative issues that they address, they are resolved. What the problem is for upscaling these movements and agroecology with them is the infrastructure around, is the context, mostly the institutional and political context that do not put in place yet the measures required to support their activities. And their activities relate to one scenario of activities is the transition, the conversion from industrialized conventional agriculture to agroecological approaches. And there, agroecology is carried out a very important social and ecological function, which is restoration. It's like restoring the health of any other living system. There is where many policies are needed to support these communities and these families, these groups that are making this conversion, because it's in this phase of restoring something that is not working and is highly deteriorated as conventional agriculture, and the soils and biodiversity that lives as deteriorated is where families and farmers require support, and that doesn't exist. Another issue is related to the whole support at credit level, support systems levels, that is not addressed and is not adapted to what agroecology requires. And I can put an example. If you want to apply to an agricultural insurance, you have to show the bill of agrochemicals that you are buying if you are a farmer. There is going to be really difficult for farmers to convert to agroecological systems, even if when they require. And also the visualizing all the functions and services that these farmers and this kind of agriculture and production system provide to the global society. So what I would like to say that here, the problem is not technical, is not organizative from the grassroots groups, but it's more on the institutional and political context. Those are the major challenges.
Excellent. Thank you very much for this excellent framing. And ahead we have a series of presentations on specific experiences in several countries. And I would like to just hand over, as I said in the beginning, my role as a coordinator of the discussion to my colleague Frida. And Frida is working with us on different aspects of agriculture and soil protection. She's working, she has been working with the World Bank as a young professional in the area of climate smart agriculture, and she holds a PhD in biodiversity governance and a Master of Science in Geography. So Frida, please take over, and I'm very looking forward to the next presentations. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Harald. Thanks also for the kind introduction, and thanks also from my side to the first round of panelists. I think this has been very exciting and insightful. So I'm now happy to introduce another great round of speakers who will report from their country perspective. We've heard Georgina already. So Georgina is also giving a few remarks actually on the policy framework in Bolivia, how agroecology has been introduced and scaled. I'm happy to introduce Judy Maju. Judy, who is an advocate of women empowerment in agriculture and gender responsive climate action. She is the national chairperson of the Association of Women in Agriculture in Kenya, and among many other initiatives has led the Women in Food Systems Independent Dialogue in the lead up to the UN Food Systems Summit. And we have another third great speaker from India, Murali. He has over 3 decades of experience with diverse NGOs, government, and the UN programs in facilitating community-led development processes. And Murali will talk about his experience from Andhra Pradesh. So we will start with Georgina, and then move on to Judy, and then to Murali. And I'm really looking forward to hear your experience from your respective countries. So Georgina, the floor is yours to hear about the policy framework in Bolivia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity to speak again. I would like to address briefly 2 issues. One, some policy instruments and approach of them, and briefly the challenges that we are facing. That is not common to Bolivia, but I would say in general to Latin American countries. In Bolivia, has a specific instrument on the promotion of agroecological production from the agricultural perspective, but also from the non-timber forest production and management. And this law, and I'm going to go into the numbers because that's, I think, it's just confusing, and I will go more on the substance of them. And this law, what it does is declares agroecological production as a national interest and a necessity for producing safe food, protecting biodiversity, conserving the ecological processes in general, and for food sovereignty to all. And it provides elements for setting an administrative mechanism to regulate and promote agroecology. And something that is very important and progressive, I would say, that it recognizes different types of warranty systems for agroecological production that is going to be commercialized through long local and national distances, meaning it does not restrict only to the third-party organic certification, but also to participatory warranty systems. But in Bolivia, agroecology is not restricted to this very specialized law, but also is addressed in a more overarching law that sets the principles of the national planning, and which is the law on Mother Earth and the integral development for well-being. And there is recognized the multiple functions of agroecology for conserving and properly use the components of Mother Earth and life systems, for achieving well-being through ecological food systems, also to promote sustainable consumption, to conserve and strengthening the vision and approaches of indigenous peoples, acknowledging that agroecology has a very strong roots in peasant and indigenous food systems. Also, it provides for food security with sovereignty and dialogues of knowledge, meaning that not only the scientific community can provide knowledge and relevant expertise in agroecology, but also peasants, indigenous peoples, and others. And from there, Bolivia also has elements in the social and economic development plan that relates to agroecology, related to the generation of fair markets, prioritizing innovation lines for agroecology, also promoting the production of ecological inputs and seeds, strengthening national food sovereignty, diversification of diets and farming, and finally, as a key element for developing sustainable territorial management. So it's quite comprehensive, and it has the many facets of what agroecology entails. However, that doesn't mean that we as a country and as a region, we face important challenges. And briefly, I would like to mention some of them. And they are at socio-ecological level, including the disproportionate support to agro-industrial agriculture, and very, in practical terms, still very reduced to agroecology. The pressure of contentious and risky technologies as genetic modification and genomic approaches now, including digital agriculture, also aspects of migration and the feminization of agriculture that goes together with the context of disadvantage of rural women who do not have access and cannot realize the right to access, use, and tenure of land, for instance. But the challenges also go at distributional level in the sense of the dominance of this entrepreneurial value chain perspective, with still limitations to provide opportunities to other economic non-monetary approaches. Also limited infrastructure and support systems for our ecological food systems, and the discriminatory market approach that leads to think that healthy food systems, our ecological food, is just for niche markets or elite markets. And finally, which is very important, related to the previous, the political and policy challenges, once again, that emphasizes on our industrial food systems, also the restriction to agroecology to certified systems, third-party certification systems, the invisibilization of agroecology in the official statistics, just restricting to the one that is certified and exported, and also a sectorial approach, meaning that address mostly from the agricultural entities without considering that agroecology also relates to the functions and the activities done by other sectors like environment, education, health, etc. And finally, a cross-cutting challenge is the cooptation of agroecology. As I mentioned before, these processes that take or try to take out from agroecology its political meaning, its social meaning, and also restricting it to very biased technical approaches like monocrops with biological inputs. So those are the advances at policy level in my country that I can say that are very positive. There is lots of to learn from it, but also many challenges that are not only restrictive to the Bolivian territories, but I would say to the whole groups that are promoting and exercising our ecology and the Latin American region. Thank you.
Wow, thanks, Georgina. This is impressive what your country is doing. We can just hope that this will come to fruition and to scale and can be implemented countrywide and beyond. So congratulations on all the efforts you are taking in your country. So we move to another continent. We move to Kenya, and we hear from Judy about the role of climate resilient agriculture for women empowerment. So what are your lessons from your work, from your experience? What can you tell us?
Thank you very much. First, I want to say it's really an honor to be part of this presentation. And the best part is that we've heard from mostly the technical practitioners and actors within the technical field. And I'm happy to be presenting from the implementation level, where we work with the farmers, with the women farmers. And my laptop has just gone off, so allow me, I'll be reading from my notes, so I'll be bent. My head will be bent most of the time. And so I'm presenting on empowering women smallholder farmers that through climate resilient agriculture. And I'll start by stating that Africa is the sink of most greenhouse emissions, yet they contribute minimally to the same, but facing the severe impacts of the climate crisis. This directly affects the primary producers, who are majorly women, because in Kenya, women compose 65% of agricultural labor. To effectively reverse the adverse effects of climate change, we must make deliberate efforts to equip these women farmers with knowledge and build their capacity through climate resilient agricultural approaches, like the having the restoration and the conservation discussions on the grassroots. I must note that most of the farmers are semi-literate and some are completely illiterate. And so it is very important to build their capacity at that grassroots level. Our president, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, during his address at the COP26 leaders session, listed commitments that Kenya will take to tackle climate crisis. And I note that the government has indeed initiated some programs, and they're in place, like the Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Program, which is in 24 counties out of the 47 counties. And these are mainly in the ASAL areas, that is the arid and semi-arid regions. But this has barely scratched the surface in Kenya. In fact, we are currently going through a severe drought. It was declared recently a national disaster. And you can imagine the burden it has on the small-scale women. It burdens the women farmers even more, considering the already existing care burden they carry as caregivers in their homes. I honorably sit, it's actually an honor that I sit in the steering committee of the UN Women and FAO, Women Economic Empowerment through Climate Smart Agriculture. And it is a 3-year COICA funded program supporting 3 counties within the arid and semi-arid region. And the main purpose of this project is to curb climate-related challenges that hinder women economic advancement. You know, for us to address ecosystems and how best to adopt, you know, on climate mitigations, then we have to address the needs of these farmers, because we will not go and talk about climate change and climate action without first addressing their basic needs. All these efforts, that is the government and all these other development partners, and what AWAC is doing are efforts towards mitigating climate crisis and its effect on livelihoods. Women farmers have borne the brunt of climate change. Apart from failed crop and dying livestock, they lag behind in economic development. And this comes with multiplier effects on health, education, gender-based violence, land degradation, among others. The Association of Women in Agriculture, of which I'm the chair lady, has been championing climate action through capacity building, implementation, and policy interventions. AWAC promotes ecosystem-based adaptation approaches that promote the conservation and restoration of biodiversity ecosystem services and processes. This ultimately, and this include agroforestry, soil health, and climate smart agriculture. And it ultimately improves crop yield and livestock health, positively impacting food security and economic empowerment for smallholder rural livelihoods. I also wish to note very quickly that we also support vulnerable mothers living in urban informal settlements through urban farming and soil health. This is for the resilience and recovery from COVID-19 related economic shocks. You know, in addition to the climate crisis, the women are also bearing the brunt of COVID-19 pandemic. So I happen to be lucky also to be sitting and honored to be sitting in the National Agroforestry Strategy Committee, and I lead the gender and social inclusion pillar. And some of the strategies that we proposed speak broadly on land rights, tree rights, and land use and management. We must empower women to take lead and make decisions on land use, because without that, being the primary producers and the people who are directly involved in land management, then it will be useless for us to engage in these climate talks. Agroecology is possible when women are empowered. This leads to restoration of agricultural landscapes and the soil health. However, we cannot do it alone. I like the description of this talk that talks about we cannot do this in a siloed approach. We must foster partnerships. So I call for deliberate and intentional partnerships, collaboration, and alliances between us here. We represent different actors in land restoration and climate action. We can support each other towards we can support each other to achieve net zero. Unless policymakers, academia, researchers, direct implementers like ourselves, the development community come together, we will keep on having more COPs, more conferences, writing more papers, while our planet deteriorates further. We must act now. And I propose, as a team here, it is important to come up with action plans. And I would invite all of you to Kenya, come see what we are doing. Invite us to your country. Let us see what you're doing. Can we learn from each other? Can we support each other? Because we must act now. And together, we can do more. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. That was very impressive. I think I, could summarize so much from what you've said. That was a very rich remarks. I hope we can take up on this in the Q&A part. So I will pass on to Murali now. Murali, and I forgot to mention that earlier, he's the co-lead of the Andhra Pradesh Community Managed Natural Farming System. So I think this is a very impressive initiative. Murali, we look forward to hearing your remarks, how natural managed farming was scaled in India, in Andhra Pradesh, and what can we learn from your experience?
Thank you, Frida. Andhra Pradesh is southern part of the country. The Andhra Pradesh program, we call it Andhra Pradesh Community Managed Natural Farming, started about 2015, and we have a vision of reaching out to all our farmers and farm worker families and all the land by 2030, in about 10 years from now. And this is basically a no chemical portfolio of regenerative agroecological practices, living soil. These principles includes no chemicals. We want to do 365-day crop cover. We are having multi-layered, multiple crops. We are having biostimulants as catalysts for microbes to do the actual farming, indigenous seeds, and use local inputs to respond to the multiple crises of the farmer level, consumer level, and the climate level. I'll not go into the details of that, but essentially that's the principles we follow. And one of the technology seems to be simple, but the most critical is the extension. And we work with farmer practitioners as the extensionists. So only a farmer who is doing natural farming or agroecological farming can only do extension in our program. So that's the no not negotiable. And we use women groups and their federations as the program in charges. Gradually, we use the word communitization. So communitized program where women groups and their federations take charge of the program. We as a program only support them. So that's the method of work. And our learning is that instead of doing farmers to come and do only on the whoever comes forward, we want to work on a saturated mode. Saturated mode, more or less everybody in the habitation, more or less everybody in the location are covered. So that ensures that they will not slip back. Is like a de-addiction program, so that slipping back doesn't happen, and handholding till full adoption happens. So that's our methodology. That is the program we are adopting, and the program has a very intense knowledge intensity, and people who transfer and handhold the farmers. One for 10 farmers, we call them lead farmers. We have one for 100 farmers, we call them community resource persons, and mechanisms to ensure that inputs are available. And we have clusters and master trainers at various levels. So, and linked to the nutrition in a circular economy mode, where people produce and eat, and they supply to their neighbors, then they supply in the village, then the surpluses go out. So there's a circular mode of working. Only surpluses go out rather than only meeting the market needs. So that's the kind of a work we do. And our theory of change says that something like we take about 3 to 5 years to reach all the farmers in a location, and each farmer takes 3 to 5 years to cover his entire piece of land. So something like 7 to 8 years is required to transform a farmer. And since we are not offering any incentives in terms of material terms, monetary terms, the cost is something like 200 USD, 220 USD per farmer over a period of 8 years. So that's the cost that is required. And as of today, starting 16, we are in about 40% of the Gram Panchayats, something like villages in Andhra Pradesh. The remaining 60% will be taken up by March 2022 on a light touch basis. And we would like to reach all the farmers by 2027. And we will be reaching all the land by 2030. All translates roughly as 85 to 90%. So, and we seem to be on that path. If you look at our economics of this, we have done studies, and we conclude over the last 3 years, 5-6 seasons. Overall costs of the farmers are coming down when they do natural farming or agroecology. Yields are not disturbed, or they are going up, and returns are much higher. It is not just in average terms. It is in various farming situations in tribal, hilly areas, dryland areas, delta areas, plain areas. Everywhere we are able to see that natural farming or agroecological farming is able to show better than the conventional chemical farming. So that is one understanding we are getting. We are also getting understanding. We need to get further confirmations that there is enormous water savings, and therefore energy savings and fertilizer subsidy savings. So our rough idea is that to cover entire Andhra Pradesh, we may require something like 1,300 million USD with our costs, and 5 times that amount will be able to come from savings in the subsidy of electricity, subsidy of fertilizers. We have done a benefit cost analysis of 15,000 rupees, that is 200 USD, over 8 years can return something like 25 times the investment will return by adopting natural farming. So huge benefit and cost ratio is available. It is only economic cost that we are taken. It doesn't take the costs of the benefits of crop intensity increases. It doesn't take the In fact, crop intensity increases by more than 2 from our 1.3 or so. And it doesn't take the benefits of taking integrated farming like forestry, fish, poultry, fodder, livestock. It doesn't take the unfollowing that is happening in the land because of the natural farming work. It doesn't take the costs of the reduction in health costs, improvements in nutrition. It doesn't take the benefits of local employment and climate and ecosystem benefits. Even if you don't count all of them, the benefit cost ratio is about 25 or more. To be able to take beyond AP, one, we are instrumental in starting the National Coalition for Natural Farming. But we look at showcasing AP as a scaled model. If we are able to show AP as saturated, then that will be a model for the country and outside. And Andhra Pradesh CNF is able to establish national and global resource centers. So we are able to offer services to at least 10 states and in India already. And we are also reaching out to Africa and Latin America. So there are already initial effort is going on. The women SAG community architecture is further rebuilt to adapt natural farming in their issue. And in India, we have large number of women self-help groups are there. The social capital is there. They are hungry to take up natural farming. So we need to really use that architecture and go forward. Like in AP, they'll be able to easily replicate. And we look at more coalitions, more collaborations, more movements to happen to upscale. And we also wanted evidence-based for the policymakers and the agriculture universities, scientific community to agree and talk about it. So we are thinking about initiating a global center for agroecological and agroecological research and learning. KFW BMZ is sponsoring that center. So that will be a good bet in talking about evidence-based benefits of agroecology and methods and models. Digital platform is another way to ensure that tracking, transparency, accountability happens, and also models and toolkits available for anybody to take on their own, learn on their own, and practice on their own. So we are thinking about starting digital platform, and we want to get into value chain based federated collectives so that fair share of the consumer dollar reaches the farmers. Currently 30-40% is there. If that goes up to 70%, 75%, I think everybody will be hooking on to natural farming. So we are talking about examples on the ground in Andhra Pradesh, in various parts of India. We are having large number of farmer champions willing to travel and talk about this. And we are hooking on to consumers. Consumers start demanding chemical-free food, chemical-free fibers, chemical-free fodder, and that will be able to change the discourse. And we initiated the work of organic policy for Andhra Pradesh that includes natural farming, and there are other states who can adopt this, and will be able to take the agenda forward. State governments and national governments are able to offer budgets for natural farming work, although it is little cost, but budgets may require from governments and infrastructure required for local value addition. Lastly, we are looking at theory of change, revisit system change required so that sustainability and lapsing back will not happen. So we are initiating work on system change. Agroforestry Center is partnering with us in taking the system change agenda forward. I think once that happens, and we'll be able to offer the new systems thinking to the other states and other countries. And that's the way we look at upscaling to happen. We have a desire and we have a need to reach out to entire world farmers to move on to natural farming in the coming 10 to 15 years. I think we will be there at least halfway or 60% in time. Thank you very much, and I hope.
I think we're running a bit out of time. Maybe you want to say a closing remark or two, looking at the time.
Yeah, I'm only saying that we have got a good model, probably the largest model in the world, Andhra Pradesh model in the agroecology. It is able to race towards saturating Hpe in the coming 10 years and offer models to the world, and offer systems examples, offer people who can do that, offer the knowledge and material to the world very quickly. And we should do whatever is required for that, and we'll be happy to do that. We'll be traveling, as Judy said, visit Kenya. We'll visit Kenya. They should visit us, and we'll visit other states, other countries. We have something to offer, and we have a lot of things to learn from everybody else in the world. It is a partnership at a global level, work at local levels. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Murali. I think this is a very impressive initiative in Andhra Pradesh, and I believe a lot of countries can learn from what you're doing. I see we have one question just coming in. Can agroecology help address the issue of power in food systems? For example, how large agribusinesses control the agenda. Any example from your countries presented here? From maybe start with Judy. So I think the power aspect is a very critical one, right? What can you tell us about that one?
Sorry, I missed on the question. Could you repeat?
So how can agroecology help address the issue of power in food systems? So for instance, how large agribusinesses control, quote unquote, the agenda. That was a participant's question. Are there any examples of how sustainable agriculture basically can help shift the distribution of power in terms of government or private sector?
Indeed, I think that would be the basis of determining how and what can be prioritized in terms of in the food systems or the food value chains. When it comes to the policy approaches, I can talk about what I just said in my presentation. We are working on the Agroforestry Strategy. This is the first ever Agroforestry Strategy in the country. And this is what will be forming the policy, the agroforestry policy. And the fact that we have a pillar on gender and social inclusion that ensures that there is equal distribution of whether power or the resources, it enables the planning and the management of the land to be utilized in a way that is sustainable. And the policies are also prioritized on what is most important, especially on food security, but more so on what is agroecologically, efficient, because we have a trend where people are giving up farming and embracing real estate. And so we have more concrete developments coming up and less of tree planting and land sustainable management practices. And so when we have policy, and if that's what you're referring to as power, then it is easy to determine how land will be used. And that can only be addressed by agroecology, having to know how the land will be managed. I hope I have responded accordingly. Thank you.
No, thanks so much. We have another question sort of related to the incentive system. So, right, so that's my taking on it. So we need obviously incentive mechanisms for people to introduce sustainable farming practice, at the same time connect them to markets, change the policy framework. So there's one question related to agroforestry, but maybe we can spend that to other sustainable land use approaches as well. Is the valorization of local foodstuffs a possibility for agroforestry projects or for other sustainable land use projects? Basically, as we've talked a bit or alluded to the metrics of kind of internalizing also negative social and environmental costs related to industrial agriculture. So what could you, maybe Georgina, what's your thoughts on basically the incentive mechanisms, also the inclusion of such metrics, of kind of change in thinking of how we measure productivity or production? So what can we learn from agroecological approaches there?
Thank you. Well, certainly biodiverse production systems. I'm going to stress and always stress on biodiversity, not only, as I mentioned in my intervention, not only because it relates to biological, ecological processes. The fact of conserving and sustainably using biodiversity, either from the wilderness or cultivated one, it's also an approach for a different social and economic organization that helps to overcome these structures of power that Judy was mentioning, and that elements of inclusion and distribution, as she was mentioning as well. This is the time. It was always the time, but now is the urgent time to promote these local food systems that not only relate to this geographically close food production, but also this closeness in the relations between the different actors, in this case, the ones who produce and the ones who consume, because in those interactions and in these close relationships is also where the strong social tissues are built. And it does not only refer, as I mentioned, this geographical closeness, but also the local production contributes to enhance and sustainably use that biodiversity that is crucial for ecological processes, but also from a perspective of human health and the health of the planet. Not only the production of the inputs, synthetic inputs that are very much concentrated in few companies, and also the distribution relates to the very important social ecological impacts in our planet, but also all this demand in energy. And we have also to acknowledge that we have already many decades facing cities that the population is growing highly, and we need from there also, and in the face of climate change and other changes and shortage of resources and energy, we need also to decentralize the production systems. And there is where, for instance, agroecological urban agriculture plays a very important role, in which the food production is local, with the resources that families have, either in the rural or the urban area. And working with agroforestry, for instance, and different means of organizing production, transformation, distribution, and consumption certainly is a very, very important because we don't have too much time. I cannot share some examples from my country, but I can mention that, for instance, the Guarani nation in Bolivia, the indigenous Guarani nation in Bolivia, is promoting communitarian economic small enterprises that have the logic of communal economics. And one specific element that they are working is conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, the one that is harvested from forests, but also the native varieties that they use for generating these monetary and non-monetary economic processes, but also securing healthy food for themselves and the communities around. Just to say that there are examples of that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Georgina. So I think we're a little bit behind schedule, but still, I've seen that Morali has, in our basically internal chat, made some very valid comments. Morali, if you want to keep it really short, please, just a minute. So just maybe you want to reiterate what you commented here, and then I would give the floor to Ulrich. Looking at the time a little bit. I'm sorry.
I have 2 points. One on the power. The one is the women have started taking charge of the program, so that is an important power shift that is happening from men to women. The second is the small farmers, marginal farmers, they are the first to adapt agroecology. So they are shifting the power in favor of the marginal farmers, small farmers. The third is local value chains. Automatically, local circular value chains are taking away the need for agribusiness to be there. That's the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make is that incentives, we are actually resisting incentives. Incentives are not important. They're temporary. People may switch back. We are talking about benefits to talk as incentives. Cost savings should talk as incentives, or the fairer share should talk as incentives. They are long-lasting benefits, cost, and fairer share. That is the second point I was making. The third point I am saying that local inputs are required in agroecology, natural farming work. Therefore, agribusiness is already weak to some extent. If that goes up, we have lots of fights with the Western interests, but that we should get ready. We cannot get away from that fact. Thank you very much. Thank you, Frida.
Thanks so much, Murali. Yeah, so with a look at the time, I think we have 13 minutes to go. So I'm trying to stick to the time. We basically now have a slight shift in schedule. While Fergus was meant to speak earlier, it's going to be, no, the other way around. Yeah, yes, spoke for Fergus. So Fergus will be part of our last set of remarks. But first, I would like to give the floor to Ulrich Hlpe, who is a senior environment specialist with the Global Environment Facility, where he coordinates the GEF's work on sustainable land management and landscape restoration. And he has a vast expertise on sustainable forest management and land degradation neutrality. And we asked Ulrich to give some ideas or perspective about the financing aspects. So how could integrated land use approaches be financed or finance be scaled? And maybe also what's the work GEF is doing in this regard? Thank you.
Thank you, Frida, and thank you also to all presenters for the interesting presentations. And I think what has come out of the presentations is really that we need to address the entire food system in those interventions, and we need to move from the many positive examples. We need to move from those boutique style examples to scale, and some solutions that have been proposed for that is that we need to mainstream these approaches, agroecological approaches, in national policies and in subnational policies. And the examples from India, from Andhra Pradesh, from Judy from Kenya, from Gina from Bolivia already mentioned this as examples. And I think this is really important that this is mainstreamed into national strategies for climate, for biodiversity, and for agriculture, because this is also a basis for financing and a precondition for financing. First of all, I want to mention a very important source is, of course, national domestic financing. And we know from the Dasgupta review and also from the recent UN review report on the Food Summit that there is huge subsidies going into the agriculture sector. It's really something like 500 billion every year, and 90% of those subsidies are actually harmful or perverse incentives, or let's call it, they are not nature positive. They are not helping to achieve what we are trying to achieve. And I think only if those policies are mainstreamed and coordinated across sectors at the national level, then this can also lead to financing streams being more coordinated and getting those shifts that are needed from the harmful investments towards nature positive investments. And then, of course, this is also the policy environment is then also the basis for the ODA financing, of which the GEF is a part of it, and then we have we have also other funders like the GCF, many bilateral ODAs supporting agroecology. The Adaptation Fund is funding local solutions. But these financing streams really need to be coordinated also with the national investments. We will first need to get rid of those harmful investments. And the GEF, for example, has an integrated program on food systems. We are working right now with 27 countries in a really integrated way, also to promote this policy coherence in the countries, that we bundle all the resources, financing resources together. And then finally, my final point, we have to leverage private and financial sectors in this effort as well. So working on the whole value chain, if we address the entire food systems, starting from the traders, the manufacturers, buyers, and the retailers, we all need to involve in. And then the financing side, from we need to help them also to shift their screening practices, so that there are so many also new funds in the arena supporting sustainable land management, agroecology, also the LDN fund, for example, Agri Plus and Green. There's so many funds, I just cannot name them all. And these funds also, we need to help them to have the right safeguards and right screening practices in place. And then finally, blended finance is an important point as well, to have public and private partnerships in financing, also to help de-risking some of the investments of the private sector, to make sure that we can also create good revenues for the farmers that are involved in those programs. So that's all from my side for the time being, and hand back to Frida. Thank you.
Wonderful, Ulrich. Thanks so much. So 7 minutes left. We happen to get hold of Vargas, who kind of dropped out before. So Vargas, if you want to take the floor and offer some policy conclusions, or some conclusions from a governance aspect of how we can mainstream, how we can scale integrated land use approaches. What's your take on that? Please, Vargas.
I think it's been really fascinating, because some things are coming through in what a lot of people are saying. First, relating to the need to address whole food systems, and secondly, the combination of public and private. So the governance and policy happens in both the private sphere and in the public sphere. And of course, they interact with each other. And then civil society and consumers connect to those two things by the influence they have. So we've really got an integrated picture. And as has already been mentioned, there's a need to both consider removing perverse policies that are constraining the uptake of agroecology, as well as developing enabling policies that allow it to happen. And because a lot of the things associated with sustainability, whether it's soil carbon or many aspects of environmental sustainability, are effectively slow variables. And that means that they need help often if you're going to bridge a gap between investment and returns in agroecology. So really critical that you get both of those happening at the same time. And then there's this critical issue of integration across sectors, you know, water, agriculture, forestry, trade. All of these things are connecting and affecting the environment within which agroecology is or is not adopted. And then there is scale. And quite often there is neither, there's a sort of missing middle. There's neither the social capital nor the policy instruments at a landscape scale where many ecosystem services are first manifest and can be managed. And without the structures, without the social capital, it's exceedingly difficult to operate. So getting that structure at that territorial level is absolutely critical. And that brings us on to the principles. Georgina mentioned that there's a problem that some people are very selective in which bits of agroecology are actually being taken forward. And quite often the social political dimensions are not there. And we've talked a lot about power and addressing power imbalances in order to increase the agency of women, the agency of small farmers, other marginalized groups, and consumers being able to show their preferences. And potentially, principles can actually be a hugely important integrating factor for policy. Because if different ministries are actually having the same principles that they're attempting to work by, then even if they have separate initiatives, that those initiatives may begin to be brought together through the application of a common framework of principles. And that's why the Hlpe 13 principles of agroecology are potentially really a useful framework to sort of guard against greenwashing and to ensure that people are not selective in which principles they're applying, but do so comprehensively. And I'd like to finish by connecting this issue of governance and policy through to knowledge, because one of the critical principles of agroecology is co-creation of knowledge. And we all want evidence-based policy, but it's very difficult for the knowledge of small farmers, of women, to be having the influence that it should if we maintain the same ways of generating and sharing knowledge that we have, the established science. And what we need is to reconfigure research and development along transdisciplinary lines so that local knowledge becomes as important as scientific knowledge. It's a real dialogue and an equity between local knowledge and science, so that you're genuinely working together to solve problems rather than having one knowledge system more dominant and tending to be the reference against which other things are judged. And without that shift in knowledge, it's very difficult to see agroecology really coming to the fore and being taken as seriously as it needs to be if it's going to operate at scale across a large number of countries. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Fergus. So I think with a view to the time, we don't have much more time left. I think we could continue this discussion for much longer. I think it has been really, really insightful. I'm extremely thankful to all the speakers who made their time today on a Saturday to join us, to provide their insights, their experiences. I can only reiterate what's been said. I think agroecology, integrated land use approaches really do have tremendous potential to solve essentially the triple crisis we are facing of climate change, biodiversity loss, ecosystem degradation, livelihood aspects, poverty. So I think it has tremendous potential. We've heard about also the challenges related to scaling integrated land use approaches. We have siloed approaches still. We have different line ministries working on different aspects of essentially what's part of the, or should be part of the same thing. We've learned that a lot of alliances and partnerships are shaping up. We need much more of that. We need more policy coherence. We need more collaboration. We also need more new metrics to basically internalize social and negative environmental externalities that all too often come with essentially a focus on productivity only, hectare or production per hectare. So we also need new approaches to factor in negative social and environmental externalities. there is a lot ongoing. We have heard from Jeff that we have much more integrated programs. We have new funds. We have new blended finance schemes. We have a lot of movement on a landscape scale. Yeah, so a lot is happening. Let's all work towards scaling this. We thank you once more for joining us today. And also, maybe as has been mentioned in the very beginning, we're currently writing a paper on this, TMG and eCRAF, with support of the GIZ. So once this is out, we would be, of course, very happy if you would take a look into this. And without much further ado, I think we have to come to an end. Thank you once more. Have a lovely weekend. And yeah, thank you.